All right, welcome everybody to The Slow Pitch, and today we have a special guest. Today we have Robin Waite, and he's an author of the book Take Your Shot, and he does a bunch of different things surrounding business, sales, all that good stuff, and Fearless Business is the name of his business. But Robin, why don't you say hi and give us a quick introduction of who you are?
Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate you having me on the podcast as well. It's a real pleasure to have this conversation. So aside from being a business coach, which I do through the coaching practice, which is obviously, as you named, is Fearless Business, I'm a dad, dedicated husband, cyclist and surfer. And really, I'm trying to work my way into early retirement. But by that, I mean, I'm going to carry on doing the stuff which I love, which is coaching small business owners. Where I say retirement, it's all about figuring out how to have fun and joy from my business and combine it with my personal life and make sure that there's no work-life balance. It's just balance. That's the idea.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of people out there who don't understand that work-life balance is really about getting kind of what you want out of life and not so much, hey, I need to have equal parts work and life, right? It's what do you want, right? I think that's kind of the message I heard from your YouTube channel, your book. That's kind of what I'm getting out of from you, right? Am I accurate? Or?
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. I think, firstly, I think a lot of people take business far too seriously. You spend, aside from sleeping, you probably spend most of your waking hours actually at work, so it has to be fun. It has to be enjoyable. I think there was a statistic. I don't know whether this is a global statistic, which I heard, but somebody did a poll and they said apparently 40% of people are unhappy in their current job or business or work, whatever it entails that they do on a daily basis. That's really sad. You think of like 40% of the human population are out, working age. That's billions of people who are out there miserable doing this thing which they show up to every day. So I think there's better ways to run a business and certainly integrate it into life in a far better way.
And what's even weirder still is I think there's probably a percentage of those who own the business who feel that way, which is even scarier, right? I don't know how that happens. So let's put it this way. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about pricing. We're going to get probably in a bunch of different areas, but we're going to talk about pricing and how, as a business owner and as somebody that's in sales, how important pricing is and what you can do to maximize your efforts in the price area where you're getting most out of your dollar or most out of your time and maximizing the price that you're charging, but still also being fair, right? So getting the value that you need out of that.
This is the Slow Pitch Podcast.
So let's kind of dive into a little bit. First of all, you had sent me a book because we were talking a little bit on the phone, and it was very interesting listening to some of the things you were saying, and then I got your book and I started reading it, and of course between the time of recording and the time that I got the book, I didn't have a good chance to get the whole thing done, but I got a lot of it done, and I found that the story resonated with me and some of my past, in that I've been in the position of the main character. I've also been in the position of the other character that's involved. And so can you give us a little high level, the storyline that you have in this book? Because I think that's one component that's going to be important to then we get to pricing, right?
Yeah. So it's told as a parable. So it's a short book, and there was several books which kind of inspired me to tell it as a story that way. But there was a few things which I wanted to get across in the book. So first and foremost, there was 5 simple business models, which it was really important that I could get them across in a simpler way as possible. And the story starts off with Russ, who is the main character. He runs a golf pro business. I'll try not to give too much of a spoiler alert in case anybody does want to go and read it. And it starts off, it's like a murky sort of morning when he wakes up and he's like, oh, I've got to drag myself out of bed away from my family to go and run, get my business off the ground. And, as he's driving into work, his first client cancels on him for the day because it's raining. This is set in England, of course, so it has to have rain in it, naturally.
Yeah, of course.
And gradually, as kind of the day goes on, more and more clients sort of cancel on him, and he's literally losing cash because clients typically paid him at the end of the session. And he's really getting to a point where he wants to sort of quit his business. And then, there's a bit of the hero's journey, the arc, which comes into it. So he meets a business coach who then sort of starts to transform his life. They swap services. So as he's giving the coach some lessons, he gets some business coaching advice back. And of course, he turns his business around. So what most people don't know is actually it's based on a real story. So it's my first coaching client, which I took on back in 2016. And a lot of people ask me, well, which character are you in that story, Rob? So I'm
I was gonna
actually
ask that.
I'm not gonna say, right, because I want people to try and obviously work it out, because there's a bit of everything in there.
Yep.
But the one bit which a lot of people miss is that it's I tell it as quite an emotive story, and Russ, the main character who it's based on, I found it quite hard to actually draw the emotions out of him to put into it. So the only point of reference I had was my own business journey over the last 20 years, so where you hear some of that emotional part, that's me.
Yep.
That you're hearing it.
Yep.
I'll let everybody figure out the rest of the characters in the story.
Yeah, I thought it was a great story because it does a good job of, first of all, if you're going to England, any area in Great Britain, you're going to want to go golfing. That's number one rule, right?
Yep.
But number two, it made me think about kind of how real that is for anybody that has a business of their own. They're the solopreneur, that individual who is running a business. They're trying to do everything, and they don't necessarily know everything, right? Mm-hmm. So you're like trying to figure everything out, but then how do you know what you should charge? And I think back to my early days of even the business that I'm in, trying to figure out what's the right price. How do I figure that out? And what is everybody else charging? And I think that's some of the things that, you end up talking about a little bit about how do you know that they're charging the right numbers? How do you know that they're charging the wrong numbers? How do you know you're charging the right number? All of those things are good questions that come into mind. And I think, how does one figure out, how would you do it? Just because I can tell you how I would do it. How do you figure out where to price your services or a service? I mean, you do business coaching. Yeah. How do you help people determine that number? Because it's an arbitrary number, isn't it? I mean,
yeah. Well, again, bit of a backstory to this. So I did a study when I first started of about 200 businesses. I got them to fill out 20 questions and scale each part of their business on a scale of 1 to 20. Question number 1 was rate your business plan on a scale of 1 to 10. And through about 76% of clients rated it 4 or less. So their business plan was substandard. And something like 25.6% of the people who filled out graded their business plan 1, essentially, which means that their business plan was non-existent and they didn't refer to it. So I've come up with this concept around setting prices, especially, which is what I call goal-focused pricing. And it becomes your business plan on a page. It's like your one page, this is what our business model looks like. So an example that I give, and I'll keep the numbers nice and simple. Imagine that a business owner wants to earn $100,000 a year. That's their first year goal. And the next question I would then ask, well, that's great. So, but you've got this product. It might be, they're a web designer, so they're going to sell websites, for example. How much are you going to sell your websites for? And they say, oh, well, roughly $1,000, say. Okay, great. So what we do is we take the big number, divide it by the little number. And then that's where the third question comes in. Great. So you've got capacity to deliver 100 websites this year. That's normally the point where their eyes pop out of their head or through their glasses and like, oh gosh, no, couldn't possibly build that many websites. It's just ridiculous. Right. That's 2 a week, let alone getting the clients, right? So we're already getting not just into pricing, but we're getting into supply and demand, sort of the basic economics of how a business stacks up. So then we query it. Okay, great. Well, so how many websites do you think you could deliver then? Like, what's your capacity? And they might say, well, maybe 20. So what we've got now is we've got a gap between the $1,000 they thought they should be charging, maybe based on their competitors or other things which they've seen, maybe their own value system. And somehow we've now got to elevate them to $5,000 for this, on average, website which they're going to sell. So I'm not a fan at all of just 5xing your prices and that being, there's been the odd occasion where somebody is so vastly underpriced themselves that we can do that. But the way I look at it is if you're charging 5 times more for something, your perceived value versus theirs, you've got 5 times the opportunity to stack even more value into your offer, which obviously then creates a better ROI for the customers that you're actually delivering those websites for, or whatever your product or service is. So we create this like virtuous cycle. So a lot of business owners, they end up in something I call the sales cycle of doom. When they sell for too little, okay? Sell, deliver, sell, deliver, sell, deliver, sell, deliver. Constantly marketing, constantly chasing, getting the next sale. Where's the next bit of money coming from? Paying their mortgage, putting food on the table, sell, deliver, right? And then eventually they either get sick or have to go on holiday. So they have to down tools, and they then when they come back, take a big deep breath. And then it starts again, sell, deliver, sell, deliver, sell, deliver. And so imagine like there's like this orbit around the business owner. They're the planet at the center of this. And there's a gravitational field. That's that force field of having to sell, the sales cycle of doom. If we charge more money, i.e. we expand our gravitational field, what happens is when you expand like a gravitational field, you end up with more time. Time goes slower. So you end up with more time to deliver a better quality product or service, which gets your client better results or outcomes on the back end, which makes you more referable. So your reviews and testimonials are far better. Plus, they also want to stick around and buy more stuff from you. So you make more money on the back end. And you end up with this really virtuous cycle where you can make significantly more money, but with far fewer clients. And then it becomes far more holistic. And this is why pricing is so important, because effectively there's three ways that you could grow a business. You can save some money, you can sell more of the same thing, or you can sell the same thing for more money. Those are the three really big options.
That's it.
Got, right? Saving money for me is short-term, very short-term thinking. I think during times of crisis, economic downturns, things like COVID, the pandemic, that's a good time to really, roll up your sleeves and save some cash because you don't know what's coming, basically.
Yeah.
But it's short-term thinking. It's hard then to eke out extra profit to reinvest. Selling more of the same thing equally comes with problems because when we're talking about supply and demand, so imagine that client that goes, great, I can deliver 100 websites, say, fantastic, great. You've systemized, it's process driven, great. How many clients do you think you can get? And then all of a sudden they're like, right, we're a new business. We don't have, even our own website or any brand out there or any social media or any marketing. And then they're like, well, I can only stimulate enough demand for 10 websites. So again, that's another clue that then all of a sudden they've got to sell 10 times the amount, like do 10 times the amount of marketing, sell 10 times the amount of websites. So that's where supply and demand are really out of whack, and you've got to balance off the two. The great thing is if you get your pricing right and you end up needing half the clients, but you're making double the money, well, you can do half the marketing, technically. I know it doesn't quite work like that, but you get the picture. It's all about finding that nice balance where you're not overworked, you're not going to burn out, you can have nice holidays with your family, get good quality clients coming through still, and you've got a nice little buffer slowly starting to build up.
One of those things too, that if you layer on top of that, the old 10% rule, which this may or may not make sense for some people, but for me, what we do every year is we look at our list of clients and we say, who are the bottom 10%? Who were the most pain in the butt that we didn't deal with and it wasn't worth the money? Those people need to go, and we should never let them hire us again. And then the other one is just a matter of just like they just don't have the abilities to pay the rate that's required to keep up with the rest of the clients. And that's okay. And that's somebody that we can sometimes sub out. We can give to somebody that we know that charges less. And we don't have to take anything off the top. We can just hand it away because you're right. It frees up the time to be able to service your existing guests, clients, whatever, so that you can get what you need for your clients. And I think that's dead on. The more that you can make it so that the value that you're providing gives them what they need and then some for the dollars that they're paying, they feel happy, and you're happy because you get enough for what you should be getting, right?
Yeah.
I heard you a while back on one of your podcast episodes where you talked about how charging an hourly rate is like highway robbery. You should never do that. And when I listened to that, I thought, you're right. I hadn't thought of it in those terms that you had put it in, but talk me through why I should never, ever make myself an hourly rate. There's times that you can, I'm sure, but like why you shouldn't be represented as an hourly rate. And if you do, how to make sure that you're doing it right.
Yeah, I had a lot of pushback actually when that episode came out because
I think you're right. You're absolutely right.
The word I used was unethical, and all of a sudden you put big words in there like that, which carry weight for a lot of people. So they were like, well, that's just ridiculous. And of course, what you're getting is people projecting because they know they're selling hourly rates and they know you're talking about them. So that was a fascinating just experiment in its own right. But yeah, the only way I can explain this again is I'll just use an example. So basically what it comes down to is when somebody's selling hourly rates, the only person it benefits is the person selling the hourly rates, because if they want to make more money, they've got to sell more hours. Yeah. Now, thankfully, most people are ethical, moral, upstanding citizens, and they wouldn't just go out and jack their hours up just to make more money. Right. But the fact that you could leaves wiggle room that there will be some people who will do it. They'll try it on. Yep. So the example I use is, again, we'll go back to our friendly web designer. And by the way, if anybody's wondering why I keep referring to website design, it's what I used to do for 12 years in my agency. So it's before I started coaching. So it's an industry I know well.
And it's easy. Yeah. Easy to understand.
Understand.
Everybody kind of knows.
So imagine we had 3 web designers in a room, right? And web designer number A is charging $50 now, and you ask him how long it's going to take, and he says, well, I think it will be 20 hours. So you go, okay, again, $1,000 for a website sounds fair. But so off they trot, and then you don't hear from them for 3 months. And like, well, where are they? And what they forgot to tell you was they hadn't been doing it particularly long. They're not particularly that good at design or listening. And because they're not charging enough, they've got too many clients to service. So 3 months later, they come back and say, here's your site. Looks a bit odd, from a design perspective. It doesn't have the blog or the shopping cart you wanted. And then you're there saying, well, I need those things on the website. That's the whole purpose of it, so I could market my business and sell stuff. And so they go, yeah, we can add it on, but it will cost you an extra 10 hours. And you're like, no, I'm not paying for that. We agreed on $1,000. So what you end up with is a client that's resenting working with you, and now you've also got a resentful web designer because they reluctantly agree to do the extra 10 hours for free, because they don't want to rub you up the wrong way. But everybody's like at odds here. So that's the first clue, that hourly rates don't really work. There's always friction within that. And you can start to see a few clues here that skills and expertise, experience, they have a lot to play within these examples as well. So website designer number 2 comes along, and they're crazy, like their experience is just out of this world. They're brilliant at what they do. They've been doing it for 20 years, but they don't know what Robin and Rob now know about pricing. So they're still charging $50 an hour, but because of their experience, and they've got it all systems, process driven, they've got great systems, they turn it around within a week. You've got your website back, and actually billable hours, it's only 10 hours. Well, hang on a second. So the guy who's more experienced, who does a better job and it looks great and it's got the blog and the shopping cart, gets paid half what the inexperienced guy got paid initially. So there's our second clue that it doesn't work. It doesn't play to like the more experienced business owner, like service provider.
Yep.
And then we get web designer number 3. Now she's an absolute ninja. She gets like marketing. She's read Breakthrough Advertising and by Eugene Schwartz. It was written in 1967, and she can sell ice to an Eskimo via a website, right? She just gets it. But she turns the website around in 72 hours. It actually doesn't need a blog or a shopping cart, because she's realized she can get you leads just through a landing page, a well thought through, well written landing page. But you have to pay $10,000 for the privilege of it. However, she's that confident in her ability to get you 15 highly qualified leads each and every month that if she doesn't start achieving that within 30 days, she'll refund you your 10K and pay you $1,000 for wasting your time. So now you've got a completely different value proposition there altogether, because it's solely focused on what is the outcome that the end client desires. Well, look, let's face it, in business, we do need to make some money. That's important. But leads and inquiries and building relationships really is where it's at. And so if you can build a one-page landing page that creates that outcome, why shouldn't that be worth more because of her experience? And I think that the challenge that a lot of people have is they struggle to articulate the value of what they offering can actually do for the client. So they focus very much on like features. So I'll build you a 5-page website with a blog, with a shopping cart. And they start adding more features to make it look fancy or sound fancy.
Yep.
Because it's easy to sell that. And they'll sell $50 an hour because it's easy to, $50 is a small number. But you get the picture, right? It's easier to sell $50 than $1,000 thing, right? So we'll sell for $50 because that's easier. So everything is always working in the favor of the service provider. And we need to flip that on its head. It has to be about, can I deliver this full and remarkable solution to a client that ultimately meets their needs? And this is where the ethical side of it comes into it, because now I'm no longer qualifying whether I take this project on based on how many hours can I sell. I'm qualifying it based on whether I can actually deliver that outcome or not. Yes. And there are people who will still take work on knowing full well they can't deliver that outcome. That's why they don't do it that way, right? They'll just deliver a website using the features which they said. Again, doesn't happen often, but it does happen. Really, I want people to, when you start to think about the outcome which you're delivering, make it about, I'm going to save you time. We can grow your business through reaching more people. We can grow your business through converting more people. We've figured out a way that we can get people to come back and buy from you 2, 3, 4, 5 times through the services which we provide. So make it really think about what their dream outcome would be.
To me, what I'm hearing is kind of, if for people that listen to the show on a regular, they've heard me say, you're selling on what they need. And you're kind of saying the same thing. It's like, okay, what does this person need from you? So if they're needing business consulting work from you, and in your conversations with them, I'm sure you're asking a bunch of questions before you decide whether or not to take them on. And once you decide, okay, this is a person that I think could use the services that I have, and that we can help them with this problem, and that there's a value for them to understand that they can actually change the way they do business in such a way that they have more time or more money or more whatever that they want based on these things and what we've done before, that's a value that's worth a lot more than just an hourly rate.
Yeah.
Right. So to me, I feel like, the next question is obvious then. And I think, again, people that have listened to the show may have heard some of this before, but like, it's different hearing it from a different perspective. How does one stop offering their services at an hourly rate? Because in the very beginning, when my wife and I started the company, or when she started the company, she would start it out as, these are the things I'm providing. These are the things that I'm giving you. This many hours of work, this. And she could easily calculate how much things ran.
Yeah.
Until we started to figure out, no. What they want is it's going to solve this problem and that problem. And it's going to solve both of them. And they don't have to worry about that problem anymore once they have this in hand. So that's worth how much to them. And that's really what the way the sales process kind of goes. Because if I can sell something for $100 that's going to generate thousands of dollars, it's a value to them. And again, it's all relative, right? So I'm not going to do anything for $100, but whatever I give, whatever I provide, got to be worth 10 times or at least that more to them in value over the course of how many years, right? So how do you switch from that hourly mentality for somebody that's smaller who thinks that's the only way because that's the way everybody else is doing it? How do I switch that mentality? Because to me, it's fully mental, right? It's like, it's not a requirement.
So the phrase I want everybody to sort of remember at this point is, you've got to learn to do and be disciplined to do one thing really well for one specific type of client. Again, the reason people don't do this is because their ego gets in the way. Oh, I like the variety of clients I get to work with. Or I like the variety of the work which I get to work with, right? But then you're a jack of all trades, master at none. There's a responsibility actually to build like a really boring business in many respects, right? Do one thing really well for one specific type of client, and then you do it 1,000 times, you become an expert at it, and you can get the same repeatable results for each and every client which you work with. So again, just as a simple example of this. So I had a client who was a virtual assistant. So they're very traditionally like hourly rate type work, or you can buy bundles of like 10 or 20 hours a week, for example. So she was charging about $25 an hour for her work and struggling to get clients. She just couldn't she was doing anything from email management, diary management, writing blog articles, doing social media posts, for you name it, just general sort of admin work for small business owners. But she really struggled to get clients on board with that because it was like, oh, well, I'll do anything you want. And the business owners there going, I'm struggling, but I can't think of anything that I need to give to you, right? When we were chatting, it took a while to sort of doing some digging. And like, I always liken myself a bit to Inspector Cluedo, you have to, or Mr. Marple, you've got to go out and find the clues. Like what is something, where's the gold within this, the clue that we, the thing that we can hang our hat on. And so with her, we got talking about podcasts, and she was like, she loved podcasts. If I could make some money out of doing something in podcasting, I would absolutely give up my VA work. I said, well, funny enough, actually, and this was a few years back, so I was starting to get on the podcast or the train guesting, and I said, listen, do you think you could find me a few podcasts to guest on? So I said, look, what if I paid you to go a fixed fee to go and find me 10 podcasts to guest on? And so during that, and I ended up paying her $1,000, so I was her first customer for that. I was a slightly tricky customer being the first because she had to start building up the processes, systems, and the database to the podcast that I could guest on, and start to sort of, pull everything together. But the second client came along, and guess what? They were another business coach. So she went to the same podcast host that she booked me on. They'd had a good experience, hopefully. And so then it became a really smooth way to get them booked onto podcasts because she didn't have to go out and do masses of extra research. And what happened was she got to a point where she could book somebody onto a podcast within 15 minutes on average. That was the amount of time it would take her to do a few emails, bit of back and forth, get the diary booking done, right, move on to the next one. And if you work that out, she had effectively moved her hourly rate up to $100 an hour. So $1,000, 10 podcasts, and she was doing it in 15 minutes. So she'd 4x'd her effective hourly rate just by doing that one thing really well for one specific client.
Interesting. When somebody does that, do they need to change their branding? Do they, I mean, how do you, because now all of a sudden they've done and operated differently. Does there need to be any changes at all from the business standpoint? Or is that just like, hey, we're just transitioning?
Not even that really. I mean, in her instance, because she was so small and didn't have many clients, it like she didn't really have to change anything. It was just when she started sort of outreaching and networking and things like that, she just changed her messaging. Again, this is something which business owners get like hugely wrong. They think that they have to have like the perfect product with the perfect website and the perfect branding and all of these things. I always say to people, it's the opposite way round. You need to test the market first and see if you can stimulate some demand for this product or service, right? Because there's no point spending a year like perfecting everything and then launch it into cricket, and get no feedback on it. So I'm very much like, so there's another, an author, a guy called Daniel Priestley, who is just brilliant. He's sickeningly smart, this guy is. Just a really unique take on sort of everything in regards to business. I really look up to him. But he has a book called Oversubscribed, where he talks about essentially creating a wait list. So before you do anything, before you even really design your product, create a wait list. Because if you can't get 100 people into a wait list to sell like 10 units of your product, you probably shouldn't launch the product, or your messaging's wrong, or there's something not quite right there. And wouldn't that be great if you could spend a week trying to get 100 people into an email list, but as a part of that process, then find out, well, actually, nobody's really that interested in it. All you've done is you've lost a bit of time building a wait list. You haven't, put energy or emotion into building a product. So it's an incredibly effective like way around things. So yeah, big fan of wait lists, big fan of getting oversubscribed. Then when you sell 10, then build it. Bit risky, but it does work.
Yeah, I am too. There's a lot of people that, I've talked to who just I've got this great idea, I'm going to build it, blah, blah, blah. They start working on it. I'm like, how do you know you're not solving a problem nobody even knows existed and wants to even solve? Like that makes, to me, sounds like maybe a good idea, but have you had people ask for that or that kind of thing? So yeah, and I just got into a conversation with somebody this morning about something very similar to that. And they were trying to decide whether or not to repeat something that they just did. And it's like, okay, so a series of questions comes up with probably not. Let's not repeat that because that was actually not as productive as we thought.
Yeah.
So yeah, I hear that. I think the one of the questions that I wanted to ask you about too with pricing is there is a psychological barrier for some people. I don't know how many times you've seen this, but to me, if I'm talking to somebody, let's say, and I feel like this is going to require that I charge, instead of, let's say, I'm charging $1,000, I now need to charge $50,000. And to me, I just can't imagine doing that.
Yeah.
Have you encountered people that have that issue and ever had that problem? Because I know a lot of people do, but have you encountered that before?
Yeah, all the time, actually. It's really common.
How do you deal with that then? How do you as a somebody that's helping them in their business, how do you get them to get past that mental block? Because to me, that block, as soon as you release that block, I had that block and I had somebody help me with that. And it was like life-changing. How do you help them change?
The best way I can do it is by doing a bit of a role play. Would you be open to that, Rob?
Yeah, sure. Why not?
And then I'll break it down afterwards as well, so that everybody gets like the gist of it. You've had some help with this, so you might have to ham it up a little bit just to pretend you're kind of a new business owner starting out. But it's helpful if we bring a little bit of reality into it. Okay, so imagine there is a product which you would love to sell. It can be one which you've kind of just been thinking about, doesn't necessarily to be directly related to your business. Do you have a product in mind? Something big and expensive that you think, it'd be a dream to sell this.
Let's say I want to sell high-end cars.
High-end cars, okay.
That sounds odd. Or is this something I have to
a service myself? Would be better. I think a service would work better, either related or just something you're interested in. I noticed you've got you've got a picture of some waves behind you. Do you like traveling?
Those are the Cliffs of Moher, yes.
Okay, so imagine you were setting up a travel agency, a luxury travel agency, yes. Okay? And let's say, for example, if you were, your sweet spot is helping high net worth individuals to book the holiday of a lifetime. So it could be like an adventure holiday or a sailing holiday or the trip around the Mediterranean or the Caribbean or somewhere, I don't know, something big for all of their family, right? Imagine we were starting out. How do you think you would charge for that currently?
Yeah, well, I'd say I would probably look to find out where you want to go and then look up pricing online and probably add a percentage to that.
You'd add a percentage, okay. So, and what would be a fair percentage?
maybe 20% at the most.
Okay. So let's say, for example, the client had a budget of 100K to spend. So I can add 20% on top of that. So your cut's going to be 20K, right? So,
right.
How would it feel though, if imagining that actually you were going to put together maybe a package that was 250K for that client, but you get to keep the vast majority of it because you know that the cost base is kind of fixed, but you can create a really great holiday concierge service. It gives you a bit of bandwidth. So actually your market.
Wait, so this person's going to get a $250,000 vacation for the same price?
So imagine imagine that you're essentially kind of like creating extra bandwidth on top of that 20K that you're going to earn from it. So maybe actually if you were going to charge a fixed fee for going out and find, like, regardless of whether the holiday is like $10 or $250, you're going to charge a fixed price rather than the percentage. So your finder's fee is like, now you were talking now about 20K, but what if actually it was maybe 50 or 100K?
Okay, I'm listening.
Okay, great. Okay.
I'd be interested. I don't know how I would do that, but yeah.
Great. So we're kind of like, so what we're trying to establish here is what we call pricing bandwidth. So a lot of people see pricing as being, or selling a product as being binary. It's either too cheap or too expensive. I'm in or out. It's a yes or a no.
Oh, yeah.
I can do it, right? So
yeah, in the back of my head, I'm thinking that's really expensive for a vacation, for a holiday. Like, that seems like crazy.
You could blow that on 4 days on a Mediterranean sailing cruise, right? If you hire a motor yacht and everything that goes with it, right? So you can do it. You can spend that money quite easily. I'd love to be in a place where I could do that.
Same.
So what we're trying to establish is like, how wide is that bandwidth for you? So just thinking about your fees within it. So we start at 20K because that's where you initially pitched me at. But imagine if 3 years time, actually, people come to you and they're willing to spend, actually not just for the whole holiday, but just for your cut, because you're so well known at finding people amazing holidays, $250,000.
Wow.
Could you see yourself doing that?
Yeah.
Okay, good. But maybe not today.
Not today.
Okay. So in the future, yes, version of Rob could sell that. But today we're kind of around about the 20K mark. Okay. What I'm going to do now, and this is, you don't necessarily have to say anything at this point, but I'm going to say some numbers, and we're just looking for a few signals just to know when it's starting to get beyond the realms of possibility. Okay. When it gets a bit uncomfortable. Okay. So we're going to go in, we're going to jump in numbers because it's just for expediency. Okay. So we're going to start at 20K. So 30K, 40K, 45K, 50K, 60K. Yeah. We're starting to 50, get there. Okay. Right. Interesting. So you vocalized that. So what I'm looking at is, just for the benefit of those listening to this, I was looking at Rob's tonality, body language, and pacing, and his eye movements. I was looking at lots of different things were going on there, but Rob also vocalized it, which was quite helpful. And what happened around about 50,
because it's a podcast.
50 to 60K was where we went from comfortable into outside your comfort zone.
Right.
So here's the interesting part. When we tried to solve that pricing problem intellectually up here, 20K was the number we ended up with, right? I know we didn't put too much thought into it, but 20K was where the rational point where we went, okay, yeah, 20K.
I follow you, yes.
Right. Then we tuned into Rob's subconscious, how he feels about himself, how he values himself, right? Which doesn't have a voice necessarily. It has to voice it through Rob, but how much you value yourself, Rob, spoke to us and said it was worth 2.5 to 3 times what our intellect settled at.
Right.
Do you see?
It tells you a lot.
Yeah,
that's
exactly. So a lot of the time, people try and solve meaningful problems like pricing, as we do, because we think we're smart and we try and intellectualize it. We put it into business plans, which is sensible, but we run spreadsheets and run the numbers and we look at what our competitors are doing and all these different things. But deep down, most people know that they should be charging more. They feel it. They're like, they get that little, and we know when we've done it because we get off a call and the client's been really quick to say yes. And we go, damn, I should have charged more. Right? That's
the worst, feeling. Right? Yeah. Exactly. Everybody has that. At some point in time, you're going to hit that. Yep.
Yeah. And it's not because they're greedy. It's just because they've had this moment of realization. I am worth more.
Yep.
Right. So that's one way that we look to establish sort of that pricing bandwidth. And yes, there is a future version of you that could get to 250K in this product. Right. But what we would do is okay, great. Now go and pitch the next 10 people who come to you want a luxury holiday. We'll pitch them at 50K, fixed fee, no matter what their budget is. So the holiday's on top. but to get you to book their holiday of a lifetime, where there are never any problems. Everything is all taken care of, from the luggage to the towels to everything, like you name it. We start at 50K, we pitch 10 people, and we sell 1 or 2. From there, we get immediate validation. In fact, the validation typically comes just before we sell something, in the pitch, just before we sell something. Just hearing ourselves say those words, hearing yourself say, yes, sir, it's just 50K to invest in me, to book your holiday. You learn something about yourself. You go, oh yeah.
Yes, but you just taught yourself that you could do this. Yeah.
So we work in those sort of milestones. Right. First, we just want to get you pitching a new price, saying a big number and get comfortable with that. And we'll talk about sales objection handling and all that good stuff, but let's just hear you say the price. Then we close a deal that validates now that somebody wants it. If we can get 2 over the line, it's now a happy accident. It's not just luck. It actually, we made a plan and we sold 2, and it's starting to become a bit of a pattern. And then what we do is we go through the same exercise again. Great. Right. Now we're starting at 50. We'll do 60, 75, 80. Oh, okay. Right. So next 10, you pitch at 80. So we graduate the pricing until we hit our dream number, essentially.
Yep.
There are these really dumb rules, which I don't know who made them up or where they came from, that we just assume are gospel and right. So one of them, which you kind of alluded to, was putting your prices up by 10%, right? Who made up the rule that we could only put our prices up on January the 1st and by maybe 5 or 10%? Which dumb idiot made that rule up, right? Because you can sell to 50K to somebody yesterday and 80K to somebody tomorrow. It doesn't make it immoral or unethical, because the agreement was with each of those individuals. Obviously, if they speak, it could be a bit awkward. You can raise your prices 12 times a year if you want to, 24 times, 100 times you want to. It could get a bit confusing if you do it that many times.
Yeah.
Right.
But I mean, there's something to be said that if your workload is becoming a bit much because of your pricing too, you have to raise your price because you're out of time. And to layer on top of what you're saying, that if you're changing your price to a point that you're extremely happy, you're able to make a lot more money, you can take on less clients. You don't have to worry about it so much. You have a lot more confidence then, right? So there's a psychological confidence that comes up when you start doing it. As soon as you start selling at the numbers that are beyond what you're comfortable with, you're exactly what you said, which is you start hearing yourself saying it. And you start hearing yourself saying phrases in the sales process that you are like, I can't believe that came out of my mouth. But just by saying, when somebody asks you an objection or a question, that you're like, I mean, I had somebody it's been a little while now, but somebody that came back to me and said, boy, that price seems a little bit more than I expected. I just had somebody else tell me it was like 30% less, whatever the number was. And my answer back out of my mouth was, why do you think that is? And let them explain that why my price is higher, because they can see my work, right? So that whole mentality is a totally different mind shift when you start putting yourself into this position of knowing that the numbers that you're charging are, they're arbitrary, but they're where you need them to be to do the work that you need to do, and they're comfortable with it. I wouldn't charge somebody those numbers if they couldn't afford it and it wasn't worth it for them. If it was not worth it and they couldn't get the money back out in some form, way or another, then I would never do that. I would rather have them work with somebody that's really inexpensive that can help them basics and get those things done, right?
Yeah.
So there's a lot to be said. I mean, I think that I just feel like that whole conversation you just had me work through just a conversation like that, role play. That role play is a great example of how you as a listener needs to think about how to price things and where are your limits. And if you don't know where your limits are, you got to find out where they are. And then you need to keep pushing those numbers up until you feel like, okay, this is uncomfortable. Keep going. Don't stop. The only way you should stop is if people tell you, no way, I'm never paying you that much. And it happens over and over and over again. And then you got to back it down a little bit, because that's where the threshold is for the market, not for you, right?
That's it.
Am I off?
No, you're bang on. And I always say to people, don't believe everything you think, right? Because
that is a great... I'm going to use that phrase now. I don't believe everything you think, because that is so true. That is so true.
Because you'll have these crazy thoughts, like, I use one, which is, we can only put our prices up once a year, But you alluded to something earlier on, which is like, we knock every year we go through our client base and we knock off 10% of our clients. Again, who made up this dumb rule that we can't let clients go, or that no is an acceptable answer? Like, the goal in business is not to go around collecting as many clients as you possibly can do. The goal is to run a sustainable, profitable, and most importantly, fun business at the end of the day.
Yes.
You know, so the moment you get those knots in your stomach tightening up because, well, in fact, I had it recently. I'll share with you. Typically, I don't tend to work before 10 o'clock. That, as a rule, has been for me just because I do school run and like a bit of decompression and to have my morning coffee, and then I kind of get into my day. And for whatever reason, I booked an appointment which I thought was important at 9:15. So I would have had to have rushed back from the school run, probably missed my morning coffee, be a bit grumpy and get on this call. Anyway, that person cancelled that morning as I was out on the school run. I felt relief. And ordinarily, like, ask me this like 5 or 10 years ago, you know, I have been in business for 20 years, but 5 or 10 years ago, I'd have been mortified. Oh God, was it me? What did I do wrong? Why didn't they want to speak to me today? Oh, I hope they're all right. I'd have really worried over it. But I felt relieved, and I was like, that's interesting. Why do I feel relieved?
Yep.
And, you know, my head's telling me one thing, but my heart clearly was in the space of, God, I'm glad I didn't have to do that call that morning. Lovely person, like, don't get me wrong, but
yeah, well, there's a difference. There's a difference between, you know, who you are as a person and that reinforcement that you get from the potential clients or other clients, right? What they tell you, if they tell you no, it's fine. Like, it's move on. Who cares? Like, it's okay. You couldn't help that person. Okay, no problem. Like, it's not like a big deal. It's like almost as if you're going to a stoplight and it turns red on you. Okay, well, you can't control it anyway. What's the difference, right? So what? And if it stays green, oh, good. Okay, great. It matters not in the rest of your life.
Yeah.
What does matter is what lessons you learn along the way. And hopefully, as people have listened to us chat a little bit about this, they've learned a little something. So, Robin, I really appreciate your time. I hope we didn't miss anything that was really important. But one of the things I do want to make sure that people understand or know is if somebody wanted to get a hold of you, how would they do that?
Yeah, absolutely. So 2 ways, actually. Well, I've got one something you can do to help me. The second one is a gift, which I'd like to give to you. Well, you've got one already, but to your listeners. So I'm trying to grow my YouTube channel. I'm trying to put out regular videos on there talking about all of the good stuff that we've been talking about today. So hopefully if people just go and jump onto YouTube and search for Robin Waite with an E on the end of it, they should find my channel and give it a little subscription. That would be amazing, because I'd love to spread the word to more people and just help more business owners. The second thing is a gift. So you've got a signed copy there, but I'd like to give a free signed copy to everybody who's listening to this as well. Doesn't matter where they are in the world. I'll sign it, pop it in the post. Pauline loves me down at the post office because she gets a little cut every time I take a parcel down there. So, but they can get hold of that at fearless.biz/TYS for Take Your Shot.
Nice. Okay, great. Yeah, great book. It's a nice, easy read. Like, it's, to me, is like, I was reading through it and I'm like, I'll finish it, because this is not, one thing with me is like, I get into books and I'm like, okay, I can't read this. This is something I can't finish. Yours is like a story that is engaging, and I'm like, I want to know what happens to this guy. So like I said, I didn't get a chance because I had about 24 hours to get through as much as I could with getting back from time away, and I just didn't get it in time. But I highly recommend. I will put a link to your book too on Amazon. I think you have it on Amazon, right?
Yeah,
I saw it.
Yeah, both.
Yeah, I'll put a link to it. Somebody wants, but if they want to send you a note, by all means.
Yeah,
by all means.
It's one of my greatest passions. I don't know whether it's a bit sad or geeky, but just when people reach out to me and want a signed copy of it, it actually means a lot to me to know that I'm actually putting something real into people's hands. I think, like, probably my parting words are, like, in this digital era, like, doing physical stuff is really, really meaningful and makes a big difference. So it's the least I can do.
There's something to be said about that.
Yeah.
Tell you what, you know what? If you're listening to this, no link for you. You're going to have to go to Robin's website and request it. Tell them how to do it again.
Fearless.biz/TYS.
All right, cool. Robin, I really appreciate your time. Hopefully people got something away from it. I'm going to put some links in the show notes so that everybody has it, how to get a hold of you, and also how to find you on YouTube and so forth. I'll use the link so that if they do go there, they have an automatic ability to subscribe, so that, because that always helps. And I really appreciate your time today, and it was a pleasure speaking with you about this. So until next time, everybody, remember, let's slow down and you'll close more.
Thank you for listening to The Slow Pitch. Do you have a question about sales? Call or text your question at 608-708-SLOW. That's 608-708-7569. Or you can email them to questions@theslowpitch.com. Slow down and close more.
Thanks as always for listening today. If you like this podcast, please subscribe and leave us a review. We really appreciate it. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at The Slow Pitch. We were mixed today, as always, by Johnny Polakis, and we were produced by High Gravity Studios. Music credits and other notes are in the show notes section on theslowpitch.com, and we'll be back with another episode soon.